The screaming echoed through the first-class cabin, silencing every passenger on board. "People like her do not belong up here," the woman shrieked, pointing a manicured, diamond-clad finger at a young, exhausted mother gently cradling her infant. The flight crew rushed down the aisle, visibly terrified of the wealthy socialite throwing the tantrum. But what this arrogant woman didn't know, what no one on the flight could have possibly guessed, was the true identity of the quiet mother's husband. By the time the captain finally intervened, a career-ending twist would leave the entire plane speechless. The sprawling expanse of John F. Kennedy International Airport was a chaotic symphony of rolling suitcases, blaring intercom announcements, and the hurried footsteps of thousands of travelers. For Elena Harper, the noise was nothing more than a dull roar in the background of her sheer, unadulterated exhaustion. Elena shifted her weight, adjusting the baby carrier strapped to her chest. Inside it, her infant son, Miles, was thankfully fast asleep, his tiny chest rising and falling in a steady, peaceful rhythm. Elena gently rested her chin against the top of his soft, curly hair, breathing in the scent of baby lotion and milk. It had been an exhausting stretch of days, packing up their home, coordinating the movers, and finalizing the logistics for their permanent relocation to London had drained every ounce of her energy. She was running on very little sleep and an iced coffee that had watered down hours ago. All she wanted was to board the plane, recline her seat, and rest while they crossed the Atlantic. As she stood in the priority lane at the gate, waiting for the boarding announcement, Elena discreetly double-checked her boarding pass. Seat 2A, first class. It was a luxury she rarely indulged in, but her husband had absolutely insisted. "You're moving across the ocean with a baby by yourself, Elena," he had told her recently, his voice thick with guilt for not being there to help. "The least I can do is make sure you two are comfortable. I've taken care of everything." Elena smiled faintly at the memory. Her husband was a man of his word. But as she stood near the red velvet ropes of the priority lane, the warm feeling in her chest was abruptly shattered by a sharp, abrasive sigh from right behind her. "Excuse me, are you in the right line?" Elena turned slowly. Standing less than 2 feet away was a woman who looked as though she had been mass-produced in a factory that only made wealthy, entitled antagonists. She appeared to be in her 50s, her skin tanned to the color of an old leather briefcase pulled tight across her cheekbones. She wore a tailored cream-colored pantsuit that screamed quiet luxury, though the massive interlocking designer logos on her handbag ruined the effect. Her platinum blonde hair was styled in an immovable, voluminous blowout, and her wrists clinked loudly with thick gold bracelets every time she moved. "Yes, I am," Elena replied, her voice polite but firm, turning back toward the gate. The woman, whose name Elena would later learn was Vivian Langford, let out a loud theatrical scoff. It was the kind of noise meant to draw the attention of everyone within a 10-foot radius. "Unbelievable," Vivian muttered, pulling out her smartphone and dialing a number. She held the phone loudly on speaker before pressing it to her ear, making no effort to lower her voice. "Yes, Susan, I'm at the gate." "No, boarding hasn't started yet because they have the line completely clogged up. They let absolutely anyone into the priority lane these days. I swear they must be handing out upgrades at the soup kitchen." "Yes, darling, an infant. Right in front of me. If that child makes a sound in the cabin, I'm demanding a refund." Elena felt a familiar hot prickle of irritation at the back of her neck. As a black woman navigating affluent spaces, she was no stranger to microaggressions. The suspicious glances in high-end boutiques, the lingering stares at country club dinners, the immediate assumption that she was the nanny rather than the mother. She had survived it all with grace. She took a deep breath, silently repeating her mantra, "Do not engage. Do not let her steal your peace." The gate agent, a cheerful young man whose name tag read Greg, finally picked up the PA microphone. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We are now ready to begin boarding. At this time, we invite our first-class passengers, as well as those needing extra time to board, to step forward." Elena stepped up to the scanner, holding out her phone. Greg smiled warmly at her, his eyes crinkling as he noticed the sleeping baby. "Aw, look at him. Have a wonderful flight, Mrs. Harper. Take a left down the jet bridge." "Thank you, Greg." Elena smiled, stepping past the desk. Before she could walk 3 paces down the carpeted jet bridge, Vivian pushed her way to the scanner, nearly shoving another passenger aside. "Honestly," Vivian snapped at Greg, throwing her passport onto the counter, "you really should check their tickets before they get in line. It holds up the actual paying customers." Greg frowned, his cheerful demeanor faltering. "Ma'am, she is a paying customer. She's in first class." Vivian let out a short, breathy laugh of pure disbelief. "Oh, please. A diversity upgrade, I'm sure. Let's just get this over with." She snatched her ticket back from the bewildered agent and stormed down the jet bridge, her heels clicking aggressively against the metal floor, completely unaware of the storm she was about to walk into. The interior of the Boeing 777's first-class cabin was an oasis of modern aviation luxury. The dim ambient mood lighting bathed the space in a soft blue hue, and the gentle sounds of instrumental jazz played quietly over the cabin speakers. The seats were massive private pods, equipped with sliding doors, plush leather upholstery, and massive entertainment screens. Elena found her suite at 2A. She carefully unbuckled the baby carrier, transferring a still-sleeping Miles into the customized bassinet attachment the airline provided for bulkhead seats. She let out a long, quiet sigh of relief, sinking into the luxurious leather seat. For the first time in all day, her shoulders dropped. She accepted a warm, scented towel from a smiling flight attendant named Lena, wiping her hands and face. The nightmare of moving was behind her. Soon, she would be in London. "Can I get you something to drink before takeoff, Mrs. Harper?" Lena asked, her voice hushed so as not to wake the baby. "Sparkling water or perhaps some champagne?" "Just water for now. Thank you so much," Elena whispered back with a grateful smile. Just as Lena turned to fetch the water, a loud dramatic gasp tore through the tranquility of the cabin. Elena looked up. Standing in the aisle, clutching her designer bag as if she had just stumbled onto a crime scene, was Vivian Langford. Vivian's eyes darted from the number 2B on the suite directly across the aisle to Elena, to the baby bassinet, and back again. Her face contorted into a mask of pure, unadulterated disgust. "Excuse me," Vivian barked, her voice shattering the quiet ambiance. Passengers in rows 1 and 3 craned their necks to see what was happening. "Excuse me, flight attendant. Get over here immediately." Lena hurried back over, her professional smile firmly pasted on. "Yes, ma'am. How can I help you?" Vivian pointed a rigid finger directly at Elena. "There has been a colossal mistake. You have seated me right next to this." Lena blinked, clearly caught off guard. "I'm sorry, ma'am. These are the assigned seats. You are in 2B, and the passenger across the aisle is in 2A. I absolutely refuse to accept that," Vivian hissed, leaning in closer to Lena, but keeping her volume loud enough for everyone to hear. "I paid top dollar for this ticket. I fly this airline exclusively. I demand a peaceful, sanitary environment. Not only is she bringing a screaming infant into a premium cabin, but look at her. She clearly does not belong here. I want her moved to economy right this instant." Elena felt the blood rush to her face. The word sanitary, hung in the air like a foul odor. It was a deliberate, calculated insult, steeped in generations of prejudice. Elena looked down at her own outfit, A perfectly clean, high-end cashmere lounge set that was both practical for traveling and undeniably expensive. It wasn't about what she was wearing. It was entirely about the color of her skin. A businessman seated in 3A, a man named Marcus Hale, shifted uncomfortably in his seat and muttered, "Jesus, lady, keep your voice down." Elena unbuckled her seatbelt and sat up perfectly straight. She refused to shrink. She looked Vivian dead in the eye, her voice calm, measured, and dangerously cold. "I am sitting in the seat I paid for. My son is currently sleeping. You are the only person in this cabin causing a disturbance." Vivian's jaw dropped in faux outrage. "How dare you speak to me, you insolent little—" She cut herself off, whirling back to Lena. "Do you see this? Do you see how she speaks to a Platinum Medallion member? I know exactly what happened here. She used some cheap airline miles, or the airline gave her a pity upgrade for good PR. Well, I am not participating in your little diversity experiment. Move her to the back where her kind belongs." Lena's face paled. Flight attendants were trained to handle unruly passengers, intoxicated travelers, and medical emergencies. Dealing with blatant aggressive racism from a high-net-worth individual in the middle of boarding was a nightmare scenario. "Ma'am," Lena said, her voice dropping an octave, trying to command authority. "Mrs. Harper is a ticketed first-class passenger. We do not move passengers based on personal preference. I must ask you to lower your voice and take your seat, or you will be delaying the departure of this aircraft." "I am not sitting down!" Vivian shrieked, slamming her handbag onto the console of seat 2B. The sudden violent noise was like a gunshot in the quiet cabin. In the bassinet, Miles's eyes shot open. He let out a startled whimper, which quickly escalated into a full-throated, terrified wail. Elena's heart clenched. She immediately reached into the bassinet, pulling Miles to her chest, rocking him and shushing him gently. "Shh, it's okay, baby. Mama's here. I've got you." Vivian threw her hands in the air victoriously. "See, there it is. The crying. I told you. I am not enduring hours of noise across the Atlantic Ocean. Get the purser. Get the manager. Get whoever is in charge of this metal tube right now, because I am not taking no for an answer." The boarding process at the front door had completely stalled. Economy passengers filing past the first-class cabin were stopped in their tracks, staring wide-eyed at the wealthy white woman screaming in the aisle. A few people pulled out their cell phones, the little red recording lights blinking on. Elena pressed her face against Miles's soft cheek, closing her eyes. She felt a deep, profound sadness mixed with a boiling rage. Why did she have to endure this? Why did her infant son have to be subjected to this woman's vitriol? But beneath the sadness, a quiet, terrifying confidence began to settle in Elena's bones. Vivian Langford had picked the absolute wrong woman to mess with. She just didn't know it yet. What seems to be the problem here? The voice was deep, authoritative, and perfectly composed. Elliot Graves, the chief purser of the flight, stepped into the first-class cabin. Elliot was a veteran of the skies, a man with distinguished silver at his temples and an immaculate navy blue uniform. He had spent years handling diplomats, celebrities, and billionaires. It took a lot to rattle him. "Thank God someone with some sense," Vivian sneered, crossing her arms over her chest. "Are you the head flight attendant?" "I am the purser, yes," Elliot said smoothly, though his eyes darted quickly to Elena, taking in her distressed posture and the crying baby before locking back onto Vivian. "How can I resolve this issue so we can finish our boarding process?" "It's very simple," Vivian dictated, speaking to Elliot as if he were a slow-witted child. "This woman and her screaming baby are seated next to me. I do not tolerate infants in first class, and I certainly do not tolerate people of her demographic pretending they belong in elite spaces. You need to escort her back to coach immediately. I'm sure there's an empty middle seat near the bathrooms." Elliot's professional smile vanished entirely. The air in the cabin seemed to drop 10 degrees. He reached into his suit pocket and pulled out his company tablet, pulling up the digital manifest. "Ma'am, please wait one moment," Elliot said tightly. He tapped on the screen, verifying Elena's seat assignment. He looked at Elena, his expression softening slightly. "Mrs. Harper, is everything all right?" "I am fine," Elena said softly, though her hands trembled slightly as she patted Miles's back. The baby was finally starting to quiet down, reducing his cries to soft hiccups. "I just want to be left alone." Elliot nodded. He turned to Vivian, drawing himself up to his full height. "Ma'am, Mrs. Harper is an explicitly ticketed passenger in seat 2A. She has every legal right to be in that seat. Furthermore, the airline does not discriminate or move passengers based on race, class, or personal prejudices. You have two options. You can take your assigned seat in 2B and remain quiet for the duration of this flight, or you can gather your belongings and exit the aircraft right now." Vivian's eyes bulged. The heavy gold chains on her neck rattled as she took a step toward Elliot, invading his personal space. "Do you have any idea who you are talking to?" Vivian hissed, spit flying from her lips. "Do you know who my husband is? My husband is Edmund Langford. He is the CEO of Langford Global Logistics. He plays golf with the vice president of operations for this very airline. I can make one phone call right now and have you stripped of that cheap uniform by morning. I will have you fired. I will have her fired." She pointed viciously at Lena. "And I will sue this airline for emotional distress. Yeah." The passengers were entirely silent now. Even the people recording on their phones seemed to hold their breath. The sheer venom radiating from Vivian was suffocating. "I don't care if your husband is the President of the United States," Marcus Hale, the businessman in 3A, finally barked. "Sit down and shut up. We have places to be." "Mind your own business, you peasant," Vivian shrieked back at him. Elliot held up a hand, signaling Marcus to stay out of it. "Ma'am, this is your final warning. Sit down, or I am calling airport security to have you forcibly removed from this aircraft." Vivian let out a wicked, triumphant laugh. She reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. "Call them. Call security. In fact, get the captain out here right now. Let's see what the captain has to say when I tell him you're harboring a hostile environment and letting trash ruin the safety of this flight. Get the captain." Elena felt a fresh wave of nausea. The word trash hit her like a physical blow. She looked down at Miles, who was staring up at her with wide, innocent brown eyes. "I have to protect him," she thought fiercely. "I cannot let this woman win." "Mr. Graves," Elena said softly, her voice carrying clearly through the tense silence. "If she wants the captain, let her have the captain. Let's get this all on the official record." Elliot looked at Elena, surprised by her calm resolve. He hesitated for a fraction of a second, then nodded. He picked up the interphone on the wall and punched in a code. "Captain Brooks, it's Elliot. I need you in the forward cabin immediately. We have a severe passenger disturbance delaying departure." Less than 30 seconds later, the reinforced cockpit door clicked open. Captain Harlan Brooks stepped out. He was a tall, imposing man with an authoritative aura that immediately commanded respect. He looked from Elliot to Elena and finally to Vivian, assessing the threat level in the room. "What is the situation?" Captain Brooks asked, his voice a low, "oh no-nonsense" rumble. Vivian practically lunged forward, her face twisting into a mask of victimhood. "Captain, thank God you're here. Your crew is completely incompetent. This woman," she gestured wildly at Elena, "snuck her way into first class with a screaming child. She is harassing me, making me feel unsafe, and your crew is refusing to remove her. I demand that you have her kicked off this plane immediately. I am a platinum member, and my husband is Edmund Langford. I expect preferential treatment." Captain Brooks didn't look at Vivian. He didn't even acknowledge her rant. Instead, he reached out and took the digital tablet from Elliot's hands. "You said the passenger in 2A?" the captain asked Elliot quietly. "Yes, sir," Elliot replied. Captain Brooks looked down at the tablet. He tapped the screen to expand the passenger details for seat 2A. As his eyes scanned the screen, the passengers watching closely saw something incredible happen. The blood drained completely from Captain Brooks's face. His eyes widened in absolute shock. He stared at the screen, then slowly looked up, his gaze fixing entirely on Elena Harper. He didn't see a helpless mother. He didn't see an exhausted traveler. He saw the red blinking security code attached to her profile, a clearance code that was only ever generated for the absolute highest echelon of corporate royalty. The captain swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing in his throat. The silence in the cabin was suddenly electric. Vivian smirked, crossing her arms, believing the captain was shocked by Elena's audacity. "Do you see it, Captain? Do you see the fraud? Have her arrested." Captain Brooks finally spoke, but he didn't address Vivian. He looked directly at Elena, his voice dropping to a tone of deep, profound respect and a hint of absolute terror. "Mrs. Harper," the captain said slowly, clearly enunciating every syllable so it rang through the quiet cabin. "Please accept my most sincere apologies. Had I known you were on this flight, I would have personally greeted you at the gate." Vivian smirked her. "Brah." Her arms to Bas. The captain turned slowly to face Vivian, his expression turning to stone. "Madam," he said coldly, "do you have any idea whose wife you were screaming at?" The silence that followed Captain Brooks's question was heavy, suffocating, and absolute. The ambient jazz music playing softly through the cabin speakers seemed to mock the sheer, paralyzing tension gripping first class. Every single passenger was frozen, their eyes darting between the towering, authoritative figure of the captain and the suddenly pale, trembling form of Vivian Langford. Vivian's mouth opened and closed several times, resembling a fish pulled abruptly from the water. The arrogant sneer that had painted her face just moments before melted into a mask of profound confusion. She looked at Elena, then back at the captain, letting out a weak, breathy scoff that lacked all of its previous venom. What kind of ridiculous question is that?" Vivian stammered, her diamond bracelets clinking nervously as she gripped the leather trim of her seat. "I don't care who she is. I don't care who she's married to. She is a disruption, and I am a paying top-tier customer. My husband is Edmund Langford." Captain Brooks did not flinch. He did not raise his voice. He simply stepped forward, closing the distance between himself and Vivian, using his sheer physical presence to shrink her into the corner of her private suite. "Your husband's identity is entirely irrelevant to me, madam," Captain Brooks said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous register that carried effortlessly through the quiet cabin. "But since you are so obsessed with status, titles, and corporate leverage, allow me to educate you. You are currently demanding the removal of Elena Harper. Her husband is Damon Reed." A few gasps echoed from the rows behind them. Marcus Hale, the businessman in seat 3A, dropped his phone directly into his lap, his jaw slacking in sheer disbelief. Vivian blinked rapidly, her perfectly manicured fingernails digging into her designer handbag. "Damon Reed? Who on earth is Damon Reed? Am I supposed to be impressed by some Damon Reed?" "Damon Reed," Captain Brooks interrupted, his voice cutting through the air like a steel blade, is the founder, chief executive officer, and majority shareholder of Horizon Global Holdings. That is the parent conglomerate that finalized a total corporate buyout of this very airline recently. He is not just a VIP passenger. He literally owns the airplane you are standing on. He employs me. He employs this flight crew. And as of this moment, you are trespassing on his wife's private property. The color completely drained from Vivian's face, leaving her deeply tanned skin looking ashen and sickly. Her knees visibly buckled, and she collapsed heavily into the plush leather of seat 2B. Elena remained perfectly still in seat 2A. She gently patted the back of her sleeping son, Miles, her face a mask of elegant, terrifying calm. She had specifically requested that her booking not be flagged with corporate VIP codes. She despised the fawning, the excessive attention, and the special treatment that came with Damon's immense wealth. She had just wanted a quiet, peaceful flight to London to join her husband at his new European headquarters. But Damon, ever the protective husband, must have quietly placed a permanent security override on her profile to ensure she was treated like royalty if anything went wrong. That security override had just been triggered. That's impossible, Vivian whispered, her voice barely a squeak. She shook her head frantically, her voluminous blonde hair losing its immaculate shape. You're lying. You are making this up to protect her. Horizon Global is a multi-billion-dollar firm. The CEO's wife wouldn't be flying commercial, even in first class. She'd be on a private jet. Elena finally turned her head, her dark eyes locking onto Vivian. The sheer authority radiating from Elena was enough to make the flight crew take a collective step back. My husband's private fleet is currently undergoing mandatory aviation safety inspections, Elena said, her voice perfectly modulated, devoid of anger, but brimming with an icy, undeniable power. I chose to fly commercial because I didn't want to delay my relocation. But more importantly, Mrs. Langford, I chose to sit here because I paid for the seat, the same as you. Vivian swallowed hard, visibly struggling to maintain her fabricated sense of superiority. Listen here, I'm still a customer. My husband's company, Langford Global Logistics, handles millions of dollars in freight. If you think, Langford Global Logistics, Elena interrupted gently. It was the softest she had spoken all evening, yet it struck the cabin like a thunderclap. Elena tilted her head, her gaze piercing right through the crumbling socialite. Headquartered in Chicago, primarily dealing with mid-level transatlantic freight forwarding. Edmund Langford, Chief Executive. Yes, I am very familiar with your husband's company, Vivian. Vivian's eyes widened in sheer, unadulterated terror. How do you know that? Because, Elena continued, her voice chillingly pleasant, Langford Global Logistics doesn't actually own its own cargo planes. Your husband leases cargo space from commercial airlines to fulfill his contracts. Specifically, he leases a significant portion of his total global freight capacity from a subsidiary of Horizon Global Holdings. The silence in the cabin was so absolute that the hum of the aircraft's auxiliary power unit sounded deafening. Recently, Elena went on casually, adjusting the blanket over her sleeping baby. Damon and I were having dinner. He mentioned that the subsidiary was reviewing its lowest-performing logistics partners. He noted that Langford Global had repeatedly failed to meet basic compliance standards and was significantly behind on their lease payments. He was debating whether to renew their contract or to terminate it entirely. Elena leaned forward slightly, her dark eyes locking onto Vivian's pale, terrified face. I told him to give your husband a grace period. I told Damon that times were tough, and we should show some corporate empathy. Elena paused, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across her lips. I think I might rescind that advice when we land in London. Vivian let out a choked, desperate noise. The realization of what she had just done crashed over her like a tidal wave. She had not just insulted a passenger. She had not just harassed a mother. She had viciously, racially, and publicly attacked the wife of the one man who held the entire financial existence of her family in the palm of his hand. You can't do that!" Vivian gasped, clutching her chest as if she were having a heart attack. "You wouldn't." "I don't have to do anything," Elena replied calmly, leaning back into her luxurious seat. "You've done it all yourself." Captain Brooks stepped in, his posture rigid with zero tolerance. "Mr. Graves," he said, turning to the chief purser, without taking his eyes off Vivian. "Contact terminal security. I want this passenger removed from my aircraft immediately." "Yes, Captain," Elliot replied instantly, stepping toward the interphone. "Wait! No, you can't!" Vivian shrieked, her voice cracking in absolute panic. The haughty, entitled woman from the boarding gate was completely gone, replaced by a frantic, hyperventilating mess. "I have a non-refundable ticket. I have a gala to attend in London tomorrow night. You cannot kick me off this plane. Madam, you have created a hostile environment, delayed our departure, and verbally assaulted the wife of the airline's owner," Captain Brooks said, his voice dripping with disgust. "You are a severe security risk and a massive liability to this company. You are leaving this aircraft. The only choice you have left is whether you walk off on your own 2 feet or if the Port Authority drags you off in handcuffs." The passengers in the first-class cabin erupted into a low murmur of absolute approval. Marcus Hale, seated in 3A, let out a loud, highly intentional cough that sounded suspiciously like the word karma. Vivian's hands shook violently as she dug into her oversized designer handbag. "You are all making a massive mistake. I am calling Edmund. Once Edmund speaks to the regional manager, you will all be begging for your jobs." She pulled out her smartphone and jabbed wildly at the screen, putting the phone on speaker mode. The line rang out loudly in the quiet cabin. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3 rings. "Edmund, pick up! Pick up! Pick up!" Vivian chanted frantically, tears of sheer panic ruining her expensive mascara. On the 4th ring, the call connected. "Vivian, what is it?" A gruff, deeply exhausted male voice echoed from the phone speaker. "I'm in the middle of a board meeting. I told you not to call unless it was an absolute emergency." "Edmund, thank God," Vivian wailed, holding the phone up as if it were a shield. "You need to fix this right now. I am on the flight to London, and the flight crew is completely out of control. They are trying to throw me off the plane." A heavy sigh crackled through the speaker. "Vivian, what did you do?" "I didn't do anything," she lied smoothly, her voice pitched high with hysteria. "They sat me next to this terrible woman and her screaming baby. I asked for a simple seat change, and suddenly the captain is threatening me. And the woman, Edmund, she's delusional. She claims her husband owns the airline." "Vivian, please," Edmund groaned, sounding like a man who had dealt with his wife's public outbursts 1,000 times before. "Just sit down and behave. I don't have time for this. Who does she even think she's married to?" "Some man named Damon Reed," Vivian yelled into the phone. "Tell them they are making a mistake, Edmund. Threaten to pull our freight contracts." The line went completely dead silent. 5 seconds passed. Then 10. The only sound was the gentle humming of the aircraft's ventilation system. "Edmund?" Vivian squeaked. When Edmund Langford finally spoke, his voice was no longer gruff or annoyed. It was small. It was trembling. It sounded like the voice of a man who had just watched his entire life burn to the ground. "Vivian," Edmund whispered, the audio crackling slightly. "Tell me you are joking. Please, God, tell me you are making a twisted joke." "I'm not joking. Tell them to back off." "Vivian, listen to me very carefully," Edmund said, his voice rising in sheer, unadulterated panic. "Damon Reed is the CEO of Horizon Global. He holds the leases for a significant portion of our cargo fleet. We missed our last 2 payments, Vivian. We are functionally bankrupt on paper. I have been begging his office for a meeting for weeks to restructure our debt. If he pulls those leases, we lose the company. We lose the house. We lose everything." Vivian stood frozen, the phone trembling near her chin. But she was in the priority line. She had a baby. "Did you insult her?" Edmund screamed, losing all semblance of professional composure. His voice echoed violently through the first-class cabin, loud enough for every passenger to hear. "Vivian, what did you say to Elena Harper?" Before Vivian could formulate a response, heavy footsteps echoed down the jet bridge. 2 large, heavily armed officers from the Port Authority Police Department stepped onto the aircraft, followed closely by a frowning gate agent. The officers wore tactical vests, their radios crackling with dispatch chatter. They took one look at the chief purser, who silently pointed a finger directly at Vivian Langford. "Twice, ma'am," the lead officer said, his voice authoritative and utterly bored, projecting the demeanor of a man who dealt with entitled passengers every single day. "Grab your bags, you're coming with us." "Edmund!" Vivian shrieked into the phone, genuine tears finally spilling over her cheeks. "Edmund, the police are here. Do something!" "I am calling my divorce attorney," Edmund replied coldly. The line disconnected with a sharp, definitive beep. Vivian stared at her phone screen, her mouth hanging open. The empire she thought she ruled, the status she had wielded like a weapon to demean a young mother, had just evaporated into thin air in less than 10 minutes. "Let's go, ma'am," the second officer said, stepping into the aisle and grabbing Vivian firmly by the elbow. "Do not make us drag you out of here. It's a federal offense to interfere with a flight crew." Defeated, utterly humiliated, and completely broken, Vivian silently reached for her designer bag. She couldn't look at Elena. She couldn't look at the captain. As the police officers marched her down the aisle, escorting her out of the first-class cabin and toward the exit door, a sound erupted from the back of the plane. It started with a single slow clap from Marcus in seat 3A. Within seconds, the entire first-class cabin and half of the economy passengers who had witnessed the initial altercation joined in. A thunderous wave of applause echoed through the aircraft. Passengers cheered, some raising their glasses of complimentary champagne, as Vivian Langford was marched off the plane in complete disgrace. Elena Harper did not clap. She did not smile. She simply looked down at her beautiful, perfect son, who was sleeping peacefully in his bassinet, entirely unaware of the chaos that had just transpired. Elena leaned down and pressed a soft kiss to his forehead. "Everything is okay, my love," she whispered softly. "We're going home." Captain Brooks stood by Elena's suite, a warm, genuine smile finally breaking through his stoic exterior. "Mrs. Harper, on behalf of the entire crew, I apologize for the delay. We will be closing the boarding doors immediately and getting you to London. If you need absolutely anything, just—" "The sparkling water, Captain." Elena smiled warmly, her terrifying corporate aura vanishing, replaced once again by the exhausted, grateful mother. "And maybe close the suite door. I'd really love to get some sleep." "Consider it done, ma'am," Captain Brooks said, offering a crisp, respectful bow before turning back toward the cockpit. As the massive Boeing 777 pushed back from the gate and soared into the night sky toward a new beginning, Elena closed her eyes, wrapping herself in the luxury of peace, quiet, and justice. Down below, in a sterile airport holding room, a ruined woman sat alone, learning the hardest lesson of her life. You never know who you are standing next to in line. While the flight soared peacefully over the dark expanse of the Atlantic Ocean, A catastrophic tempest was making landfall in Chicago. Edmund Langford stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of his corner office. The glittering skyline of the city usually filled him with a sense of untouchable power, a daily reminder of the empire he had built over decades. Tonight, however, the city lights looked like a million mocking eyes. The phone call with his wife had ended recently, but his hands were still shaking violently. He stared down at the blinking light of his desk phone. The executive floor was completely empty, save for the hum of the HVAC system and the distant sirens echoing from the streets below. Edmund's office doors suddenly burst open. His chief financial officer stood in the doorway, breathing heavily. He was still wearing his pajamas under a hastily thrown-on trench coat, his hair disheveled, clutching a sleek silver laptop like it was a live grenade. "Edmund," he said, his voice trembling with a mixture of rage and sheer panic. He simply turned the screen toward Edmund and hit the spacebar. Edmund leaned in. The video playing on the screen was shaky, clearly recorded on a cell phone from behind a first-class airplane seat. "I do not tolerate infants in first class, and I certainly do not tolerate people of her demographic pretending they belong in elite spaces." Vivian's shrill, unmistakable voice blasted from the laptop speakers. Edmund watched in sheer, paralyzed horror as his wife's face twisted in a mask of hideous, aristocratic disgust filled the screen. He watched her scream at the flight attendant. He watched her demean the quiet, elegant woman holding a baby. He watched her sneer the name of his company, wielding it like a weapon of mass destruction. "My husband is Edmund Langford. He is the CEO of Langford Global Logistics. I can make one phone call and have you stripped of that cheap uniform by morning." The chief financial officer paused the video, the silence in the office returning with a suffocating weight. "Who sent you this?" Edmund whispered, feeling the blood completely drain from his face. "Where did you get this video?" "I didn't get it from anyone, Edmund," the CFO said. "I got it from the internet. The passenger in seat 3A uploaded it recently. It already has millions of views. It's trending nationwide. They are calling her first-class Vivian. The comments are a war zone, and 90% of them are tagging our corporate accounts." Edmund gripped the edge of his desk, his knuckles turning stark white. He felt a sharp, shooting pain in his chest as the reality of the situation locked into place. "That's not even the worst part," the CFO continued, pulling a folded piece of paper from his coat pocket and slamming it onto the desk. "Minutes ago, I received an encrypted automated email from the legal department of Horizon Global Holdings. It wasn't a negotiation, Edmund. It was a formal declaration of severance." Edmund snatched the paper with trembling fingers. His eyes darted over the heavy legal jargon, landing on the bolded text at the bottom of the page. "Immediate termination of lease agreements. Morals and conduct clause violation." Damon Reed didn't even wait for the plane to land, the CFO said grimly, sinking into one of the leather visitor chairs. "His legal team triggered the morality clause in our freight contracts. Because Vivian publicly identified herself as a representative of this company while engaging in discriminatory harassment, Horizon Global has unilaterally voided all of our aircraft leases effective immediately. We have freighters grounded in multiple cities. The cargo is rotting on the tarmac, Edmund. We are done." Edmund collapsed into his executive chair, the paper slipping from his fingers to the floor. His life's work, a billion-dollar logistics empire, completely annihilated. Because his wife could not tolerate sitting across the aisle from a black woman in first class. "Call the crisis PR firm," Edmund managed to choke out, his vision blurring. "Draft a statement condemning her actions. We need to spin this." "Spin this?" The CFO laughed, a harsh, humorless sound that echoed in the cavernous office. "Edmund, we missed payments last quarter. Our stock price was already hanging by a thread. By the time the markets open tomorrow morning, Shares of Langford Global are going to freefall. The board is calling an emergency session. They are going to demand your immediate resignation to appease Reed. And then they are going to file for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Edmund stared blankly at the wall. The silence was absolute. "What do you want me to do, Edmund?" the CFO asked softly. Edmund slowly reached for his cell phone. He opened his contacts and scrolled past his crisis managers, past his board members, and stopped on the name of his personal attorney. "Call the board," Edmund said, his voice terrifyingly calm, completely devoid of the panic that had gripped him moments before. "Tell them I will step down voluntarily if they secure the pensions of the warehouse workers. As for me, I need to make a phone call." "To who?" the CFO asked. "To my divorce lawyer," Edmund replied, his eyes narrowing into cold, unforgiving slits. "I had a public embarrassment clause written into our prenuptial agreement years ago. If she severely damaged my reputation or the company's standing, she forfeits her right to alimony and her shares in the estate. She burned my kingdom to the ground. I am going to make sure she walks away with absolutely nothing but the designer clothes on her back." Meanwhile, 1,000 miles away in New York, Vivian Langford sat shivering on a hard plastic chair in a sterile holding cell at the Port Authority Police Precinct. Her platinum blonde blowout was completely ruined, hanging in limp, greasy strands around her tear-stained face. The heavy gold bracelets had been confiscated, replaced by the humiliating cold steel of a bench cuff securing her wrist to the wall. She had spent the past hours screaming demands, threatening lawsuits, and demanding her phone call. When the exhausted desk sergeant finally handed her a battered landline, she had dialed Edmund's cell phone with frantic, desperate energy. It had gone straight to voicemail. She tried his office line. Disconnected. She tried her personal American Express concierge to book her a private jet back to Chicago. The operator had politely informed her that the primary account holder, Edmund Langford, had frozen all secondary cards and locked the joint checking accounts. Vivian stared at the concrete wall of her cell, the fluorescent lights buzzing loudly overhead. For the first time in her pampered, insulated life, there was no manager to complain to. There was no corporate loophole. There was no husband's name to wield as a shield. She was entirely, utterly alone, sitting in the ashes of the fire she had started. The descent into London Heathrow Airport was smooth, the massive Boeing 777 breaking through the dense early morning English fog. Inside the first-class cabin, the mood lighting slowly shifted to a warm sunrise orange. Elena Harper stirred in seat 2A. She stretched her legs, feeling remarkably rested. She looked into the bassinet, smiling warmly as little Miles blew a small bubble, his chest rising and falling in deep, peaceful sleep. "Good morning, Mrs. Harper," Lena, the flight attendant, whispered softly as she approached the suite, holding a silver tray with a fresh cappuccino, a warm croissant, and a folded copy of the morning newspaper. "I hope you and the baby slept well." "We slept beautifully, Lena. Thank you," Elena smiled, accepting the coffee. She noticed that Lena's hands were no longer shaking, and the exhausted tension from the boarding process had completely vanished from the crew's faces. "Captain Brooks has arranged for a private vehicle to meet you directly on the tarmac once we park," Lena added, her eyes crinkling in a warm smile. "We just wanted to say thank you. The crew really appreciates how you handled the situation." "Prejudice thrives when people shrink away from it, Lena," Elena said softly, taking a sip of the rich coffee. "I just refuse to shrink." 20 minutes later, the aircraft taxied to a private VIP section of the terminal. Elena gathered her belongings, securing Miles comfortably back into his chest carrier. She bid farewell to Elliot, Captain Brooks, and the rest of the crew, stepping out of the aircraft door and breathing in the crisp, cool London air. Waiting at the bottom of the private air stairs was a sleek black Rolls-Royce Phantom. Standing beside it, wearing a sharply tailored charcoal suit that perfectly complemented his tall, athletic frame, was Damon Reed. Despite the sheer intimidation his presence usually commanded in boardrooms across the globe, the moment Damon saw his wife, his stern features melted into a smile of absolute, unfiltered adoration. He bypassed the security detail, taking the stairs 2 at a time, and wrapped his arms securely around Elena and the baby. "You made it," Damon murmured, pressing a deep, lingering kiss to Elena's temple. "I am so incredibly sorry I wasn't there to help with the luggage. I missed you," Elena breathed out, burying her face into his lapel, instantly feeling the last remaining traces of her stress evaporate. She pulled back slightly, giving him a knowing look. "Though I suspect you were quite busy handling other things while I was sleeping." Damon chuckled, a low, rumbling sound. He gently stroked Miles's curly hair before guiding Elena toward the open door of the Rolls-Royce. "You could say that. The internet works much faster than transatlantic flights, my love." As the heavy doors of the luxury car closed, cocooning them in soundproof, leather-lined silence, Damon pulled an iPad from the seat pocket and handed it to Elena. "I didn't want to bombard you the moment you landed, but you need to see this," Damon said gently. Elena tapped the screen. She watched wide-eyed as the viral video played out. She saw the millions of views, the news articles, the statement from the Langford Global Board of Directors announcing Edmund's immediate resignation and the subsequent bankruptcy filing. "It was a digital massacre," Elena whispered, scrolling through the headlines. "They lost everything." "Not everything," Damon corrected smoothly, adjusting his cuffs. "I had my legal team draft a secondary proposal. I offered to purchase Langford Global's remaining physical assets and assume their operational debts for pennies on the dollar. We acquired them recently." Elena looked up, surprised. "You bought his company?" "I bought his infrastructure," Damon clarified, his eyes darkening slightly with protective resolve. "Edmund Langford is gone. His golden parachute was completely revoked by the board. However, I wasn't going to let the warehouse workers, truck drivers, and logistics coordinators lose their livelihoods just because the CEO's wife is a bigot. Horizon Global will absorb the working-class employees into our fleet. They keep their jobs, their pensions, and their health care." Elena felt a swell of profound pride. This was exactly why she loved him. Damon was a titan of industry, ruthless when necessary, but his moral compass was unwavering. He didn't just exact revenge. He constructed justice. "And Vivian?" Elena asked softly. Damon's expression turned utterly cold. "Edmund Langford filed for an expedited divorce. He activated a reputation clause in their prenuptial agreement because her actions caused the total liquidation of his assets. The judge granted an immediate freeze on her accounts. She has no access to the estate, no alimony, no trust funds. Furthermore, Horizon Global has banned her for life from stepping foot on any aircraft, property, or subsidiary owned by our conglomerate." Elena looked out the tinted window as the car glided effortlessly through the bustling streets of London. The fog was lifting, revealing the beautiful historic architecture of their new home city. She thought back to the boarding gate, to the sheer entitlement radiating from Vivian as she complained about the soup kitchen upgrades, to the horrifying moment she demanded Elena be sent to the back of the plane. Vivian had weaponized her wealth and her husband's status to crush a woman she deemed beneath her. In a poetic, almost terrifying twist of fate, that exact weapon had been turned around, entirely dismantling her own life. "Are you okay?" Damon asked, his voice tenderly pulling Elena from her thoughts. He reached across the center console, taking her hand and interlacing their fingers. Elena looked down at her sleeping son, then back to her husband. A serene, unshakable peace settled over her heart. The world could be cruel, loud, and brutally unfair, but she had stood her ground. She had protected her peace, her child, and her dignity. "I am," Elena smiled, resting her head against Damon's shoulder as the car merged onto the highway. "I really am. Now please tell me you hired someone to unpack the boxes at the new house." Damon laughed, kissing the top of her head. "I hired a team. You won't have to lift a finger." As the sun finally broke through the clouds, bathing the London skyline in a brilliant golden light, Elena Harper closed her eyes. Justice had been served cold and absolute, and her new life was just beginning. Did you love this story of instant karma and ultimate justice? The world is full of people who think wealth and status give them the right to treat others terribly, but sometimes they mess with the exact wrong person. If you enjoyed watching Vivian get exactly what she deserved, make sure to like this video, share it with your friends who love a satisfying revenge story, and subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to hit the bell icon so you never miss out on our daily dramatic stories. Let us know in the comments, what would you have done if you were in Elena's shoes? See you in the next video.